Hi, I'm Dr. Tracy Severance, and I thank you for joining us for another exciting episode of DisruptED TV. I am joined today by Eric Sheninger, and we are really looking forward to having an exciting conversation today about efficacy. So thank you for coming.
My pleasure. It's great to be home.
Oh, home in New Jersey.
Home in New Jersey.
So tell us a little bit about your journey and how that is that Jersey is home.
Yeah, well, I was born in Belvedere, New Jersey, and my parents are both former educators. My father a principal, my mom an elementary teacher. And I became a teacher at Watchung Hills Regional High School. And after some time there, became an administrator in the New Milford School District. I was principal there for a good number of years. And while we were there, a student kind of rocked my world when I took a device and said, "Thank you, Mr. Sheninger, for creating a jail out of what should be a school."
Whoa.
And it was that point in time where I really reflected on my purpose and the sort of meaning of what I do. And I really was trying to find my why. When you know your why, you really have a better understanding of what your purpose is. And at that time, I got on Twitter, and Twitter kind of showed me how far behind we were. Not just as a principal, but a school. And from that point on, we learned how to unlearn and relearn. We took a critical lens to our work. We did some amazing things. But as we did amazing things, we had the evidence to show that it was actually improving learning outcomes. And that really led then to my role now with the International Center for Leadership and Education, where I work with schools, organizations, and districts all over the world on digital transformation.
Wow, that is really important work, a global reach, and from what I understand, you call Texas home now. Is that right?
Yeah, I learned a long time ago, don't take a picture when you're working in Hawaii.
Okay.
Send it to your wife, who's digging out of a foot of snow in Staten Island,
Yes.
New York.
Yes.
So hence, now we're in Texas.
Okay, so you live there, and I heard you mention earlier in our conversation previous to the program that you're going to be traveling to Saudi Arabia potentially?
Well, we're working on a potential opportunity there, but
Wow.
I'll be in Tasmania next month and Sydney in Australia, working with educators. So I'm blessed to do the work that I do.
And how would you characterize that work?
The work really is twofold. We have a lot of great things happening in education, not just in the United States, but across the world. But more often than not, those are isolated pockets of excellence. The bottom line is all kids deserve excellence. So how do we scale that work? And, there's a big difference between saying what we're doing and telling people all the great things we're doing and actually showing evidence that the talk is actually leading to improved outcomes. So our work really is, focused on the 3 R's: relationships, relevance, and rigor. And we take that lens to look to see how pedagogy is actually changing. So when we talk about technology, Tracy, let's just use districts with one-to-one. Some districts will invest millions of dollars in a device. Okay. How has that investment actually resulted in an improvement in learning for our kids? What is that return on instruction? Meaning, what evidence do we have to support the investment in that technology to improve what we do? So the work really is, we have research-aligned rubrics where we go in and actually through evidence tell schools and districts where they really are. And we look at those artifacts. We look at everything from their data. We look at how they use it, observation, evaluation. We look at whether their assessment is changing. And that's the big key. Technology changes, is assessment changing? And then from there, we create a customized, tailored, personalized approach to help districts get where they are. So it's amazing because every implementation looks different, just like how learning should be tailored and look different for every learner because they learn differently.
So as you approach that work, there's so many things about what you said that resonate so strongly with me. It reminds me of the work and the research I've done in evidence-centered leadership that starts with the claim. Like we profess things about ourselves as leaders and teachers. We profess that the technology is going to change outcomes for kids. So when we start with the claim, then we look for the evidence, and then we go to the tasks. So the tasks, the work in which we engage, should elicit the evidence to support our claims. And I find, and I bet you find, that falls apart sometimes. That when you look for the evidence, it can be hard to
Yeah, and
find.
I think it's how we define evidence. More often than not, people want to improve achievement. which is great. But achievement is not the sole indicator of learning. I mean, there are so many elements that go in to an enriching experience for kids that really means something to them. You know, when I look at our work, we start with the why. You know, why change? How are we going to implement change? You know, and what criteria will we utilize to determine if we've been successful? And the same thing with our kids. You know, do they understand why they're learning? How they will use it outside of school? And what criteria they can use to self-assess where they are at? So, you know, I think we get into some, you know, the waters get a little muddied when we hear all this talk about innovation. Innovation, new and better. I mean, innovation, buzzword. You know, blended learning, personalized learning. I mean, they're all buzzwords. What do they really mean?
Right.
What does that look like in practice? How does it align with vision, mission, and outcomes? And how do we quantify that for not just our stakeholders, but for our staff? You know, we all want to be successful. And we have to think about how we balance that pursuit of improving achievement for all learners, regardless of zip code, regardless of label. And we challenge all of our kids. But also, how do we innovate to create an experience that, you know, treats kids as unique individuals, that focuses on their strengths? You know, all kids have greatness hidden inside of them. It's a job of an educator to help them find and unleash it. But in order to just not just say that we're doing it, let's put it this way. Talk is cheap. We need to not just talk the talk, but schools need to begin to further the walk so that we can show what this actually looks like in practice to scale the work.
So how do you take schools that I have rarely met a school, a leader or an educator who doesn't have the most worthy intentions. I mean, our intentions are good. We certainly are wanting the right thing, but there's often a space between what we intend or what we profess and what we're actually doing. And so of all the gaps in education, that knowing-doing gap is perhaps the most pernicious of all. So how do you help people get closer to their truth?
If it's important to you, you'll find a way. If not, you'll make an excuse. Don't ask others to do what you're not willing to do yourself or have not done yourself. It really begins with self-efficacy, Tracy. I mean, we have to hold ourselves accountable. And I look at it this way. You know, there's so many great things happening in education, no doubt about that. So we need to celebrate where we are, what we are. But we also have to think about, where do we want to be? Where do our learners need us to be? And we got to take that leap of faith. So when we think about moving from talk to action, you know, it really is about how we model. You know, leadership is not about position, title, or power. Leadership is about action. So when we talk about making that leap, it's a scary world. I mean, change is happening exponentially, and there's a lot of fear. And I love a quote from Zig Ziglar: fear, forget everything and run, face everything and rise. The world is changing. The landscape where our learners have to be successful is changing. If we really are in a service business, which we are, education is about servant leadership. We have to take a critical lens to our work and think about how we can grow. And it's not about having all the answers, and it's not about being perfect. You know, don't chase perfection, chase growth. And I think when we talk about really making this happen, it's that consistent focus on growing and getting better. Why? There is no perfect state, district, school, administrator, or teacher. It does not exist. So let's think about, again, what we are, where we want to be, and really plan a vision and actions to get us to that point.
So if I had the good fortune to accompany you to a school or district that had the courage to invite you in, and I really think that it does take some courage, because if you're going to go there and make a difference, you're going to have to start by helping people see what perhaps they may be a little reluctant to name right from the beginning. So let's say I come with you to a place where you're going to be there, you know, the first time.
Yep.
Where do you tend to start?
Well, I start with questions to try to get people to be uncomfortable. Most of us don't change until we really feel uncomfortable. And, you know, I typically start off with a question, you know, how are you effectively integrating technology? Or how have you effectively implemented innovative practices? and I wait for the responses. And then I comment, and I look at everything, and I say, okay, who can come up here and show me evidence that this really is an effective practice? You know, what does the data tell you? How has assessment changed? How has feedback changed? How has student work changed? How have you improved accountability? And it's hard to tell you what I see because we really work with districts and schools to honor the work they've already put in place. You know, we look at, you know, where they're going, what they have in place, and tailor, personalize everything. So I give you this one, I do a lot of walkthroughs with school leaders because I think the best way to see where we are is look at practice. And I take lots of pictures. I take pictures of what the kids are doing. I look at level of questioning, determine whether scaffolding's taking place, looking at, you know, thinking about the GRASPS models from Wiggins and McTide,
Sure.
you know, performance tasks, looking to see if there's innovative assessment, if feedback has changed, and if there's authentic or relevant context. And then we have a conversation about what we see. And we talk about, hey, I'm not going to tell you if this is good or bad practice. What do you think? And then a lot of it is part celebrations, but part, you know, leaving people with more questions than answers. My job, and I think anyone in the business of professional learning, is not to come and give schools answers and tell schools and districts what to do. That's not my job because I don't know those schools. I don't know the kids. You know, I don't know the DNA. The idea is if we leave with more questions and answers, then we sort of take ownership of the process. And we use the collective intelligence in our schools, in our districts, with our resource and with the true experts, those who are actually working in classrooms and schools to get the job done. But, you know I was in North Kansas City last week, and today I was in Middletown Township, New Jersey. And the comments I got is, I feel uncomfortable, my brain hurts, we have work to do. Not that we're not doing good stuff, but we have work to do. And everything is guided by research on what we know actually works and evidence.
Yeah, and I'm struck by your emphasis on that importance of efficacy. And as a fan, I guess you could say, of John Hattie and his work, the collective efficacy being that new number one, that together the teachers and educators in general have more influence over student outcomes than anything that any individual kid brings into the room, should really free us from this idea of believing that we are at the whim of our clientele, so to speak. Right. That we are just, you know, these look at my kids. What do you expect? That together we really can take them farther than perhaps even they believe is possible. So we talk about individual efficacy, and I'm hearing the idea of collective efficacy also coming through the work that you do. Would you say that?
Yeah, and it's interesting because the word efficacy, you know, when I was a principal, I heard it, but I didn't really dive deep into it. And, you know, if I was to define it, you know, we all set goals for schools, districts. Efficacy is the degree to which we reach those goals. And we can't say we reach a goal if we don't have a certain amount of criteria or evidence that says, yeah, you know what, we're well on our way. Or we're not quite there yet, but why? And I think that with any type of change, it begins with self-efficacy. And I again, I'm very careful to tell people what to do, but a lot of it is, hey, here's what the research, you know, when I think about just good instruction, you know, I refer back to Madeline Hunter. I refer back to, you know, cognitive domains of Bloom, you know, constructivist theory of Piaget, Vygotsky, you know, even just going to the, you know, basic needs, hierarchical needs for Maslow. So we know what works, but the idea is what's changed? Well, a lot of the research hasn't really changed. Well, we have John Hattie's work on, you know, effect size, but what's changed is how we know how the brain works, research on the brain. What we also know is all this brand new technology. So the idea is, if we're going to make any investment, an investment in a program, an investment in professional development, an investment in technology, it's incumbent upon all of us to show how that investment, not with talk, but with action and evidence, has actually improved learning for our kids.
And so what measures would you use? So if I'm, as a district, you come to me and I say, I'm with you, I get it. We've got to be able to justify this investment. And so what are some of the outcomes that I should be looking
Yeah,
for?
I mean, you can first look at all your data metrics, whether you're looking at standardized test scores, which again, it's nature of the beast, graduation rates, promotion rates, even collecting perception data from your kids. If you really want to know how well you're doing, ask your kids. And you can use technology to get them to be honest. One thing I'll ask adults is, describe learners today. And you get answers on both ends of the spectrum. Then I go, well, what if I asked your kids that same question? I also think that observation, evaluation, and feedback loops can be a really good use to see what actually is going on. If we don't know what's going on in our classrooms, how can we make claims that ideas and investments are new and better? How are we not just giving feedback that's timely, but how are we aligning artifacts of evidence to show how assessment's changing, student work is changing, how we're, where we are with scope and sequence, level of questioning, whether kids are creating a product to demonstrate mastery. What about using portfolios to measure growth over time? I mean, we have so many applications now, whether we use Google Classroom, whether we use Seesaw or Bulb. I mean, these are all ways to look at where kids are aligned to standards and see how we're giving them good feedback to inform their own growth. So I think those are ways that we can look at it, but let's even take a step further. Let's talk about, when we are able to show efficacy, what we learned in New Milford is we had evidence informing the media. The New York City media came to my school 14 times in 5 years to cover how our innovative practices were changing culture. USA Today, Scholastic Administrator, Education Week. We had that evidence from the media, and I tell people, well, why did they come and cover us? We weren't the most innovative. We weren't the highest achieving. We were the best at telling our story. We became the storyteller in chief. But you know what, Tracy? We showed how we changed assessment. We shared our action plans of how we improved our AP scores. We put everything out there to show what it really looked like, to be transparent. And I think that really, really goes a long way to usher in the change that the most of us believe in. You just have to go that little extra step to scale it.
Yeah. And so what do you encounter as the obstacles, would you say? Like if there was like that big rock that's really getting in the way of our best intentions. I mean, I think our aspirations are high, our intentions are noble.
We could be here a while.
Okay.
Well,
That
when you think about the common obstacles, we often are our own worst enemy. It's our own mindset. If we don't truly evaluate ourselves, then who are we to get other people to believe in it? Leadership isn't about telling people what to do. It's about taking them where they need to be. And it's not about getting buy-in. You shouldn't have to sell people on a better way to do things. It's how do you help educators embrace the ideas and want to change because they believe in it. Not enough time, mandates, directives, no vision, naysayers, antagonists, not enough money. Those are all common obstacles. But again, the point is they're never going to go away. You're always going to have all those elements. But the idea is how do we work proactively to follow solutions? I remember reading the No Complaining Rule by John Gordon. Great book. The rule's simple. Don't complain. If you do complain, have
a short book.
Have two solutions for your complaint.
Okay.
Talk about changing mindset and being part of the solution. So I think we have to not let challenges and turn into obstacles and roadblocks to change. We have to look at them as opportunities to do something different and better. And when we think about all the obstacles, here's what it comes down to. Don't prepare kids for something. We got to prepare them for anything. And as we think about the obstacles, we have to look ourselves in the mirror and say, are we giving our kids the best shot? Are we not providing them with the skills, but the competencies to be successful in a world that we have no idea what it's going to look like? Prepare kids for what? Tests, curriculum, graduation, promotion doesn't serve them well. We got to prepare them for anything.
I have found so many kids to be so eager to have a different kind of experience in schools. And so I think the kids are right there with us. I think they're eager, they're willing, they're ready. And as much as some people might say, well, they're lazy, they don't want to do the work, they don't do what I ask them now. Why would we
Are
do
you
things
talking about
differently?
kids or adults, Tracy?
Oh, yes.
Adults
Exactly.
are just as bad, if not worse, when it comes to
Exactly.
off-task behavior with technology.
Yeah.
It all comes down to relationships. Without trust, there's no relationship. If there's no relationship, no real learning occurs. You know, when we think about the pressure to achieve, you know, kids don't go home and tell mommy and daddy how awesome their investigation of the curriculum was today.
Yeah.
They don't go and say, hey, let's use New Jersey for an example. Oh, I took park today and it was awesome. You know, it's really how we make kids feel. And I think when we talk about really innovating and scaling the work, it's showing our kids they care. It's building those relationships, because with the relationship in place, then you can really challenge your kids to think. And I think that's something we have to really be cognizant of as we're working to move change forward in our schools.
And what you were just saying reminds me of that warm demander pedagogy that is so important, that says, based on a genuine caring relationship, I can demand from you nothing less than your best, that you show me and your peers and yourself the respect that's
It's
due.
awesome you say that, because, you know, we were talking earlier about how, you know, we say kids can't do this, that they're not going to be on task, they don't want to think, they're bored, they're entitled. I can tell you in my work, I've seen some amazing examples that fly in the face of that. We have to create the conditions where kids don't see it as schooling, doing school, but they see it as a learning experience that's meaningful. You know, I had the pleasure of being the job embedded coach in Wells Elementary School in Cypress, Texas, where I live. And that was the school that my daughter was at last year. And, you know, they really implemented blended learning with fidelity. There's a big difference between blended instruction and blended learning.
Okay, tell me about it.
Blended instruction is what the teacher does with tech.
Okay.
I'm not saying that's bad. Blended learning is where kids have control over path, pace, and place. I watched kindergartners through grade 5 be able to manage their devices, answer high-level questions, collaborate, and not only do all that, excel at such a high level on standardized test scores, and the school win a Efficacy and Digital Transformation Award because they had the results. But here's where you see, and you can go on the hashtag #ExploreWells on Twitter, and you can see every day the context that these teachers are providing. So they are telling that story. They are sharing stories of substance. They are giving us context. They are connecting it to standards. They are showing how levels of thinking is increasing, how they're challenging kids. It's sort of a perfect storm of, hey, here's what it looks like. And as a parent in that district, I couldn't be happier. My daughter did not want school to end as a 5th grader. And I will tell you this, I had the opportunity to present to some principals in Texas, and the administrative team from my daughter's school was in attendance. I broke down crying because of how much that experience meant to my kid. You want to talk about schools that get away from that's the way we've always done it? They got rid of homework. Research has shown homework has little to no academic benefit for grade 8. You know what my daughter did at home, Tracy? Read for pleasure.
Oh, thank goodness.
She rode her bike with her friends. They had they used portfolios and Seesaw and Google Classroom to chart growth over time, flexible learning spaces, blended learning, and every teacher and every administrator embraced. That's why it worked. When we talk about change, it's the collective. It's not one principal, one teacher, one superintendent. It's the collective efficacy of leaders to move that change forward. But you know, schools like Wells Elementary are doing great jobs telling their story, showing what this actually looks like in practice up against realities, standards, testing, mandates, directives, and making it work.
So we can really do both at the same time. We can really engage kids in authentic, meaningful, relevant learning experiences and do well on the required state assessments. So you're not seeing that as a bifurcated forced choice here.
not
We can operate in and.
We can, as long as we hold ourselves accountable and not fall victim to the yeah buts. You know, we tend to focus on the yeah buts when we need to place our energy on the what ifs.
Yes.
You know, what if we do this a little differently? Will it always work? No. And when you look at some of the most innovative schools, they are focusing on the what ifs. They are, you know, weaving through the fluff. They are focused on substance. They are looking at what the research has said. They are driven to create evidence. They have accountability structures, all leading to efficacy in change. And, you know, for me, there's nothing more inspiring being such an advocate for, you know, all schools, you know, public, private, whatever, when we can show what this looks like and really help guide people through. You know, everyone loves a feel-good story. I mean, I love them too. And, you know, in our work, we try to integrate that. But the feel-good story also has to deal with honesty and truth and work through the minutia in order to get the needed changes. And I think the schools that, you know, and districts we can learn the most from are the ones that find that balance, that can hit the emotional tone, but can really, you know, add that context, help us navigate through the weeds. Because what most schools, there's no cookbook, there's no recipe. There is, we can learn from others, but then we have to implement it with our own flair, with our own institutional knowledge and memory in order to make it work for the kids in our respective school or district.
And once they take that risk, have you found that buy-in follows results? So that once the momentum begins, and once we tried that and that worked, and we did that and that worked, you know, who would have thought that kindergartners can have their own, can lead the parent-teacher, so to speak, the student-led conferences?
Yep.
I mean, when we go beyond what we believe kids can't do, won't do, or don't do, to see them more as potential than the problem, that it really is limitless what we can do together.
It's
in
interesting you
schools.
say that, because success breeds success. And inherently, the majority of people want to get better. But they want to see how it works before they dip their toe in the water and then dive in. And one of the great motivators to get those who don't want to change is when everyone else is doing it, when everyone else is finding success and you're not doing it. And the most powerful advocates we have to spearhead those changes are our learners. And, you know, it's really important that we look at concepts of student agency, voice, choice, advocacy. You know, how do we honor kids' voices and, you know, use digital tools, for example, to get the introverts to be more interactive in class? How do we truly find out whether kids are understanding the concept or not? How do we build pedagogically sound lessons and let kids select the right tool for the right task? And that's the key. You know, when we talk going back to pedagogy, if we don't get instructional design right first, all technology will do is speed up the rate of failure. If we focus on pedagogy first, technology second, if appropriate, hey, I didn't ask my teachers to use tech. I asked them to build better lessons. I asked them to improve instructional design. If you have good instructional design and a sound assessment, it shouldn't matter what tool the kids select. Can you give him or her standards-aligned feedback or assess to determine if they've learned? And then advocacy. When we think about schools, it is about our learners. Make no mistake about it. We work for kids, not superintendents, not boards. So do we let kids help us develop our one-to-one policies? Bring your own device. When we think about changing grading and homework, our kids are on the committee. When we hire new teachers and administrators, think about it. New courses, curriculum. We got to put our learners front and center.
And all that you said is so powerful and so compelling. And all along, I was thinking we could replace kids with teachers, because at every tier, at every level of education, I think people have a need to have their voice heard, that people have something to contribute to the conversation that will help us move this process forward.
Yeah, and I think it's the art of listening, which is probably the most one of, you know, heroes of communication, you could say, or untold heroes, is, do we actually listen? And by listening, that means we actually act to do something. Is it always going to be what people want? No. And the same thing you could say about being present. During a conversation, are we really present? And how is that actually being utilized as part of our leadership toolbox to change culture?
Well, I can tell you it has been my honor and pleasure to be present with you and listen to what you have to say. So much just resonates so strongly with me, and it gives me great faith in our opportunity to improve schools in really powerful, meaningful ways so that we do this better. And to know that you're championing that work across not just the nation, but the globe, really gives me a lot of hope. So thank you.
Well, I thank you for asking the tough questions. And we can't shy away from the answers that make people uncomfortable and tackling the issues that we know are important. With all the good that's happening, and there's tons, we still can't be afraid to have those good conversations and really push others to be the change that they wish to see in education.
Amen. So I think that people are going to want to have an extended conversation with you, perhaps, that they might want to reach out to you. So I'd like to ask you to just take a look in the camera and let people know how they could contact you.
All right, everyone. I am not a hard person to get a hold of. Ask my wife. So you could find me on my website, ericsheninger.com. On Twitter, I am E_Sheninger. I'm also on Instagram, LinkedIn, Google+, Voxer, Pinterest, and I've probably missed a few, but I'm not a hard person to get hold of. And, I'd love to have a conversation with you. I won't have all the answers, but hopefully I can guide you to get those answers that you're looking for.
Well, I'm sure they can count on you at least for the right questions. So
well,
that they could
I'm
find
good at
their
that.
own
I'm good at
answers.
that. Just,
all right.
Well,
this has been an exciting episode of DisruptED TV. My name is Dr. Tracy Severns, and it was my great pleasure to be joined by Eric Sheninger today. Thank you for joining us. I hope to see you again soon.